The village of Kachia sat on the edge of the savannah, where the tall grasses swayed like waves under the wind, and the dust of red earth clung to the feet of every traveler. Life there was tied to the rhythm of the seasons. When the rains came, the fields turned green with millet, sorghum, and groundnuts, and laughter filled the farms as families worked side by side. When the dry season arrived, the air was heavy with dust, and the people relied on stored grains while the hunters took to the forests. At the center of this life stood the marketplace, always alive with voices. Women calling out the prices of peppers, traders haggling over kola nuts, drummers beating skins to lure customers to their stalls. And towering above it all was the great baobab tree, older than any living soul in Kachia. Elders gathered beneath its shade to settle disputes and pass judgment, and at night children gathered there to listen to tales by firelight. But not all stories told in Kachia were filled with laughter and wisdom. Some were poisoned with whispers, gossip, and cruel laughter. For in Kachia, children were considered the wealth of a family. A woman's respect was measured by the sons she bore, and her joy by the daughters who fetched water at her side. To be without children was to live as a shadow, walking but never truly seen. And it was in this world that a young woman named Zainabu found herself caught in the storm of scorn. When Zainabu first came into Kachia as a bride, she was radiant. Her skin glowed like the morning sun after rainfall, and her smile was gentle enough to calm even a restless child. Her husband, Bello, had been proud to marry her, for she was admired not only for her beauty, but also for her grace. On their wedding day, the village had danced until the moon slipped across the sky. Drums thundered, ululations pierced the night, and blessings were poured upon them. Everyone expected their compound to soon be filled with the cries of children and the smoke of endless cooking fires. But as the seasons turned, no child's cry came. One rainy season passed, then another, and still her arms were empty. At first Bello reassured her, saying, "Patience, Zainabu. The Almighty gives children in His own time." His voice was kind then, and his touch warm. But patience has limits, and soon the warmth in his words turned to ice. The smile that once lit his face when he saw her became a frown of disappointment, and his voice, once tender, now cut like a blade. It was not only her husband's heart that changed. The village noticed, as villages always do. At the market, women pretended to whisper, but their words carried like arrows in the wind. "Look at her," one would say, adjusting a basket of okra on her head, a calabash that holds no grain. Another would reply, "Even the gods have closed her womb." Some laughed openly, pointing when Zainabu walked by with her head bowed, pretending not to hear but hearing every word. At home, the whispers grew louder. Bello's sisters visited with sharp tongues. "Brother," they would say, "how long will you waste your youth? Other men are fathers already, and yet you remain barren with this woman. Take another wife, one who can give you children." Bello would sit silently, but their words planted seeds in his heart. Slowly, his affection for Zainabu shrank, leaving only bitterness behind. Each insult weighed on her like a stone. At night, she would sit outside her hut, staring at the wide sky filled with stars. She prayed in silence, asking the Almighty why her womb remained empty. Tears would fall onto the dusty ground, soaking the earth that had refused her seed. Sometimes, in her sorrow, she would speak aloud to the heavens. "Have you truly forgotten me? Am I less of a woman because I cannot bear a child? Must I be the village's laughter forever?" Her pain was not hidden from the children of the village either. Boys mocked her in play, chanting cruel songs, while girls avoided her compound, whispering that she carried bad luck. Yet, even in her suffering, Zainabu carried herself with dignity. She cooked, she farmed, she greeted neighbors, though their greetings were often sharp and empty. Still, in her heart, she nursed a small flame of hope that one day the story of her life would change. She held on to the words of a wandering herbalist she once met by the stream, who told her, "Motherhood is not only in the womb, but in the heart." A child may not come through your body, but destiny may still call you mother. At that time, she had not understood those words fully. But destiny, silent and patient, was already watching her path. For though the people of Kachia mocked her, and though Bello turned away from her, Zainabu's story was only beginning. And the same village that scorned her would one day kneel at her feet. As moons turned into seasons and seasons into years, the silence in Zainabu's compound became louder than the sound of drums. Other compounds rang with the cries of children at dawn and the playful laughter of little ones in the evening, but hers remained empty. The absence was a wound she carried everywhere she went, and the people of Kachia never let her forget it. At the market square, the women gossiped without mercy. They squatted behind baskets of tomatoes and groundnuts, whispering loudly enough for her to hear. A woman without children is like a calabash without water, one said, clicking her tongue. She looks healthy, yet she carries nothing of value. Another added with laughter, Ihia, perhaps the gods sealed her womb because of a secret sin. Their voices were sharp, but their laughter cut even deeper. Zainabu kept her head down, clutching her calabash tightly, pretending to bargain for peppers, though her ears burned with shame. Even in her own home, the air grew heavy. Bello, once a husband who adored her, now avoided her gaze. His words grew short and harsh. If food was too salty, he shouted. If the fire burned low, he scolded. Often, he returned from the fields and sat in silence, staring at the ground as though his disappointment lay there. When Zainabu tried to speak softly, to remind him of the love they once shared, he turned his face away. Bello's sisters and cousins added salt to the wound. Whenever they visited, they came armed with insults. Brother, they said, their eyes flashing with mock pity, how long will you allow this barren tree to stand in your compound? Even the young boys in the village have become fathers before you. Take another wife before your old age steals your chance. They looked at Zainabu with sneers, their words meant to slice her open. Bello never defended her anymore. Instead, his silence was agreement, his nods were daggers. The children of Kachia were no kinder. Boys sang cruel songs as she passed. Zainabu, Zainabu, where is your child? Even a goat has little ones, but not you. The girls, following their mother's whispers, avoided her as though barrenness was a disease they could catch. At night, Zainabu's loneliness was heavier than the darkness. She sat outside her hut, her eyes lifted to the wide sky filled with stars. She wept silently, praying to the Almighty. Why have you forgotten me? She asked. Why must I drink this cup of shame daily? Sometimes, when her tears refused to stop, she whispered, maybe it would be better if I left this village, if I disappeared into the forest and never returned. But she endured. Each morning, she rose, swept her compound, tended her small farm, and carried herself with dignity. Yet inside, her spirit grew weaker with each passing insult. Still, a small ember of hope flickered within her. She believed that life could not always remain this way. Somewhere beyond the pain, she felt destiny watching. She held on, though she did not know why, though she did not know how. And so the days stretched into nights, and the mockery of Kachia became the rhythm of her existence. As the mockery grew sharper, Zainabu began to search desperately for answers. She traveled beyond her village, walking long distances under the scorching sun, seeking healers and diviners. She visited the old herbalist by the stream, who gave her bitter concoctions brewed from roots and bark. She drank them faithfully, even when they burned her throat and made her stomach churn. She tied charms around her waist, wore amulets around her neck, and whispered incantations taught by elders who claimed to know the secrets of fertility. But still, her womb remained silent. Once, she sacrificed a white chicken at the shrine of the village oracle. With trembling hands, she laid the offering before the carved figure of the goddess, begging for mercy. The oracle's voice, heavy and slow, declared, "The river does not always flow through the same path. A child may not come from your womb, but motherhood may still find you." Zainabu left confused, her heart heavy. The words sounded like a riddle. Back at home, Bello's patience had snapped like a dry twig. "Enough of these wasted journeys," he shouted one evening, his face hard with anger. "You spend all your time with charms and prayers, yet nothing changes. I will take another wife. Maybe she will give me the sons you cannot." His words struck her like lightning. She felt her chest tighten, as if her heart itself had cracked. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. From that day, Bello treated her not as a wife, but as a servant. He left her to sleep alone in the hut, his back turned against her. The other wives in the compound mocked her more openly now, strutting proudly with their children at their sides, laughing cruelly as she passed. One co-wife taunted, "Zainabu, fetch water quickly. Perhaps you may never carry a child, but at least your hands can carry calabashes." Laughter followed the insult, echoing in her ears long after they walked away. Zainabu's spirit sank lower each day. Sometimes she wondered if life itself was worth living. She avoided gatherings, no longer joining in the evening dances or festivals. Her footsteps grew slow, her voice faint. But one evening, as she fetched water from the stream, she met an old traveler resting beneath a tree. His beard was long and gray, his walking stick worn from many journeys. He looked at her closely and said, "Woman, why do your eyes carry so much sorrow?" At first, she remained silent, but then her tears burst forth, and she told him her story. The old man listened patiently. When she finished, he spoke softly. "Do not lose hope. Remember this, motherhood is not always of the body, but of the heart. The child who will lift your head high may not yet be revealed to you." Zainabu wiped her tears, puzzled yet strangely comforted. His words echoed the oracle's riddle, but still, she could not understand. She walked home slowly that night, her heart heavy yet carrying a faint spark of hope. She did not know it, but destiny was already preparing her path. Soon, a great famine would strike the land of Kachia, and in the midst of that famine, her life would change forever. The rains failed. At first it was whispers. Perhaps the clouds are only late this year. But as moons passed without a drop, the soil cracked like broken clay pots, and the land groaned beneath the weight of hunger. The once green fields of millet and sorghum turned brown, their stalks bent and lifeless. Even the mighty river that snaked through Kachia shrank into shallow pools where fish gasped for breath. Hunger crept into every compound. Children who once played in the dust now sat weakly in the shade, their ribs showing like the strings of a drum. Women pounded empty mortars, their pestles falling in slow rhythm, producing no food. The market square, once alive with bargaining voices, became a ghost of itself, stalls empty, laughter gone. Zainabu, though despised, did what she could. She rose before dawn to search for wild roots in the forest, sometimes walking miles under the harsh sun just to return with a handful of bitter leaves. She boiled them into thin soup that barely satisfied the tongue. Her neighbors, who had once mocked her barrenness, now came secretly to her compound, begging for a share of whatever she found. Though their insults had left scars on her heart, Zainabu could not turn them away. She shared her little with open hands, whispering to herself, "The fire that burns your neighbor's hut will soon reach yours. We survive only if we help one another." Yet hunger knows no loyalty. Even Bello, who had taken another wife and grown distant from her, came one evening with weary eyes. His new wife had fallen sick from starvation, and their child wailed endlessly. Without a word, Zainabu gave him the last calabash of soup she had saved for herself. She watched as he carried it away, her own stomach twisting with emptiness. But in her spirit, she felt a strange strength. The famine grew so fierce that the village elders gathered beneath the great baobab. Their voices were heavy with despair. "We have angered the gods," one declared. "We must offer sacrifices." Animals were killed, prayers lifted, but the sky remained hard as iron. The drought continued. Then one night, as Zainabu walked back from the stream, her body weak but her spirit unbroken, she heard a sound that froze her steps. It was faint at first, carried by the wind. the thin, desperate cry of a baby. She paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, soft but piercing, like a bird calling in the night. Her heart raced. She followed the sound through the thicket, her feet stumbling over roots and stones. The cries grew louder until she reached a clearing near the base of a withered tree. There, wrapped in a piece of faded cloth, lay a baby, tiny, fragile, and abandoned. Zainabu gasped, her hands trembling as she bent to lift the child. His skin was dry, his body weak from hunger, yet his eyes, when they fluttered open, shone with a light that pierced her soul. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Who would leave such a gift in the wilderness?" She pressed the baby to her chest, feeling his heartbeat against hers. At that moment, something stirred within her, something deeper than words. The years of mockery, the endless nights of sorrow, all of it melted as the child's soft breath warmed her skin. She knew, without doubt, that her destiny had arrived. The dawn after she found the baby, Zainabu returned to Kachia with the child wrapped securely in her shawl. Her steps were tired, but her spirit blazed like fire. Neighbors watched in shock as she walked through the village. "Is that a baby?" they whispered. Women exchanged curious glances, men muttered among themselves. Some mocked with sharp tongues. "Ah, so Baron Zainabu has stolen a child now." Others shook their heads, their faces etched with suspicion. But Zainabu ignored them all. She carried the child home, bathed him carefully, and warmed milk for him by mixing goat's milk with ground millet. Though she had no breast to feed him, she found ways to nourish him. Each cry he made was a reminder that she was no longer empty. She gave him a name, Ao, meaning joy, for he had brought light into her darkest days. Raising Ao was not easy. Hunger still haunted the land, and every grain of millet was guarded like treasure. Yet Zainabu sacrificed her own portions, often going without food so the child could eat. At night, when he cried from hunger, she sang softly to him, her voice shaky yet full of love. The songs were old lullabies her own mother once sang to her. "Sleep, little one, the moon watches over you. Dream, little one, the ancestors guide your path." The village remained divided. Some said, "Perhaps the gods have given her this child to silence her enemies." Others spat on the ground. "She is cursed, and has now cursed the child as well." But the baby grew stronger each day, his laughter filling the air of her compound like music. Bello, her husband, returned one evening, his pride trembling before what he saw. The child crawled toward him, smiling with innocent joy. For a moment, Bello's heart softened, but shame covered his face. He muttered, "He is not my blood," before turning away. Yet deep inside, he knew the truth. The woman he had mocked had found a blessing greater than all his wealth. Zainabu, however, no longer sought Bello's approval. Her world revolved around Ao. When she carried him on her back to the stream, she felt the weight of love pressing into her skin. When she worked in the fields, she tied him to her side, whispering, "You are the proof that I am not barren, that my heart is full." As weeks turned into months, the famine slowly began to ease. Rains returned, and the soil drank deeply, reviving the land. But even as crops grew again, people spoke less of the hunger and more of Zainabu's mysterious child. Some said he was blessed, destined for greatness. Others feared him, whispering, "Such a child, found in famine, carries the spirit of the ancestors." Zainabu cared little for their words. For the first time in years, her heart was alive with purpose. She had been wounded, mocked, and cast aside, but now she stood tall, cradling the child who had rewritten her destiny. And though she did not know it yet, Ao would one day rise to shake the very foundations of Kachia, proving to all that greatness is not always born from the womb, but from the heart that chooses to love. Years passed, and little Ao grew strong under Zainabu's care. What began as the cry of an abandoned baby had blossomed into the laughter of a boy who carried light wherever he went. His eyes sparkled with a wisdom beyond his years, and his steps, though playful, seemed purposeful, as if destiny itself guided him. But in the village of Kachia, tongues never rested. Some villagers, softened by time, said, "Zainabu's God has remembered her." Others sharpened their whispers like spears. No one knows where the child came from. Perhaps he is a spirit child who will bring doom. Children his age sometimes refused to play with him. They called him Omoare, child of the earth, as if he had sprung from the ground rather than a mother's womb. Boys mocked him in the dust. "At least we know our father's names." "Who is your father, Ao?" Their laughter rang cruelly, but Ao never wept before them. Instead, he clenched his fists, lifted his chin, and walked away. Yet at night, when the moon lit the compound, he would bury his face in Zainabu's lap and whisper, "Mama, why don't I have a father like the others?" Zainabu's heart ached each time, but she held him close. Stroking his hair, she said, "Ao, listen to me. The baobab tree does not ask who planted it before it grows tall. It simply spreads its roots and touches the sky. You, my son, are like that tree. Forget the voices of those who mock you. The Almighty Himself has planted you in my arms." Still, Bello's presence haunted the boy. Whenever Ao ran toward him with childlike joy, Bello turned away coldly. "He is not my blood," he often muttered. And yet, deep within, he was disturbed by the boy's strength and charm. It pained him that the child who called another man father, only in dreams called him nothing at all. Pride chained his heart, preventing him from embracing what fate had given him. Despite the rejection, Ao grew skilled. He ran faster than boys older than him. He carried water with ease, climbed trees like a monkey, and sang songs that left even the elders listening in wonder. Zainabu noticed how he often paused to help the weak, lifting heavy firewood for old women, sharing his food with hungry children. She whispered prayers of gratitude, for she knew the oracle's riddle was slowly unfolding. Yet the shadows of doubt never left Kachia. One evening, during a village gathering beneath the baobab, a heated debate broke out. An elder, his voice loud with suspicion, declared, "This boy is not ordinary. Found during famine, raised by a barren woman. Such children often bring trouble." Another elder shook his head. "Or perhaps he is a blessing, sent to lift her shame." The people murmured, divided, uncertain. But Ao, too young to understand the weight of their words, sat beside Zainabu, holding her hand tightly. And she, though wounded by their suspicion, whispered into his ear, "Do not fear, my child. The river may twist, but it always finds its way to the sea. Your path will unfold in its time." In that moment, though the village doubted him, Ao believed only his mother's words. And those words rooted deep in his heart, preparing him for the storms yet to come. By the time Ao reached his 12th year, his name had become both a song and a curse in Kachia. His laughter echoed in the fields, his strength impressed the hunters, and his kindness softened even the hardest hearts. But the same things that drew admiration also stoked jealousy. One afternoon, during a wrestling match among the village boys, Ao faced a rival older and bigger than him. The match began with shouts and drumming as villagers gathered. The larger boy sneered, "Let us see if a child with no father can stand as a man." The crowd roared with laughter. But when the dust settled, it was Ao who stood tall, his rival flat on his back. The people gasped. Some clapped in amazement, but others shook their heads. "Such strength is not natural," they whispered. "He carries the spirit of something dangerous." Zainabu, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt pride and fear mingle in her chest. She cheered for her son, but inside, she trembled at the sharp eyes that now studied him with suspicion. Not long after, tragedy struck. One night, as the moon hid behind dark clouds, a fire broke out in the compound of a wealthy elder. Flames licked the thatched roofs, sending sparks into the air. People shouted, buckets of water passed from hand to hand, but the fire raged. Amid the chaos, a child was trapped inside one of the burning huts. The villagers cried out, helpless, afraid to enter. Before anyone could stop him, Ao dashed into the flames. His small figure disappeared into the smoke. Minutes stretched like hours, but then he emerged, carrying the coughing child in his arms. The crowd erupted in relief, but as they embraced the rescued boy, their whispers turned back to fear. How did he survive those flames? No ordinary child could run through fire and live. That night, as villagers whispered beneath the stars, suspicion deepened. Some said, "He is chosen." Others spat bitterly, "He is cursed." Zainabu's compound became both sanctuary and battlefield. Some villagers came to thank her for raising such a brave boy, bringing gifts of yams and millet. Others came with questions and accusations. Where did you find him? Who left him in the bush? What spirit gave him such strength? Their voices were heavy with suspicion. Through it all, Zainabu stood firm. She faced them with calm eyes, saying only, "This child is mine. The Almighty placed him in my hands, and I will not abandon him." But when night fell and silence covered the village, she held Ao tightly, tears staining her cheeks. "My son," she whispered, "greatness walks with danger. The same people who clap for you today may turn against you tomorrow. You must be strong, for your journey will not be easy." Ao, though still a boy, nodded solemnly. "Mama, as long as you are with me, I fear nothing." And so the boy grew, walking a path lit by both light and shadow. What neither he nor Zainabu knew was that his trials had only just begun, and soon, the fire of destiny would test them both in ways the village of Kachia could never imagine. As Ao grew into his 17th year, his strength, wisdom, and courage became undeniable. The same villagers who once mocked Zainabu now turned to her compound for help and advice. When disputes broke out, people asked for Ao's voice, for his words were steady like the river and clear like morning light. But admiration often breeds envy, and envy plants the seed of betrayal. Among those who watched Ao with growing resentment was Bello, Zainabu's husband. For years, he had rejected the boy, calling him a stranger. Yet, as the villagers' respect for Ao grew, Bello's pride became a wound too deep to ignore. Men whispered, "Even without a father's name, this boy stands taller than many of us." Their words stung him like scorpions. One evening, Bello sat with his friends under the palm wine tree. Their calabashes clinked as they drank, their voices rising in drunken laughter. One of them sneered, "Bello, the boy you called not your blood, is now the pride of Kachia. Soon, people will forget you exist." Another laughed harshly. "Perhaps the child is blessed, perhaps cursed, but either way, he outshines you." Bello's face darkened. That night, as he returned home, he looked at Ao differently. Not as a son, not even as a rival, but as a shadow that threatened to erase his name from the village. It was around this time that a wealthy trader from a neighboring town visited Kachia. The man had no children and had been searching for an heir to inherit his wealth. Seeing Ao's strength and intelligence, he was impressed. He approached Bello secretly and said, "Give me the boy. I will raise him as my own. He will inherit my riches, and you will share in my fortune." Bello's heart, poisoned by envy and blinded by greed, did not think of Zainabu's years of sacrifice. He did not think of the tears she shed or the insults she bore while raising the child he rejected. He thought only of wealth. And so Bello plotted. One moonless night, when Zainabu was asleep, Bello called Ao aside. "Come," he said gruffly. "A man has seen your greatness and wishes to make you his heir. You will live in riches, far beyond this poor village. Follow me." Ao, though cautious, obeyed. He respected his elders and had long yearned for his father's acceptance. Perhaps he thought this was finally a chance to be recognized. But as they walked into the darkness, Zainabu stirred from her sleep. A mother's heart never slumbers fully. She woke to find her hut empty of Ao. Fear clutched her chest. She rushed out, her wrapper clinging to her in the night breeze, and saw their figures disappearing into the distance. She followed silently, her feet stumbling over stones, her breath ragged. What she heard, when she drew close, froze her heart. Bello was bargaining with a wealthy trader, his voice cold. "Take him. Raise him as your own. He is strong, he is clever. Only remember me when fortune smiles." Zainabu's cries split the night air. "Bello, you would sell the child who gave me life? The child I found when all had mocked me? You would rip him from my arms as if he were a goat in the market?" The traitor stepped back, uneasy. Ao's eyes widened with shock, his chest burning with betrayal. For the first time, he saw clearly. The man he longed to call father was ready to discard him for wealth. Bello snarled, "You think this boy is yours? You who could not bear a child? He is mine to give away." But the villagers, awakened by Zainabu's cries, began to gather, their torches flickering in the night. Whispers ran through the crowd like wildfire. Is Bello selling his own son? No, not even his son. The boy he rejected for years. Bello's shame was laid bare before all. Yet shame did not stop him. His pride twisted into rage. He shouted, "This boy will ruin me. Better he leaves than I live in his shadow." Zainabu stood before Ao, spreading her arms wide like a shield. "If you want to take him, you must take me too. For without him, I am nothing." The traitor, unnerved by the scandal, turned and disappeared into the night, leaving only dust in his wake. And in that moment, Ao's heart broke, not because of the villagers' whispers, but because of the truth that had been revealed. The man he had yearned to love him had chosen betrayal instead. The events of that night spread through Kachia like harmattan fire. By dawn, every tongue wagged. Bello tried to sell the boy. Zainabu's loyalty saved him. The once proud man became the shame of the village. But shame often breeds cruelty. Bello turned his fury on Zainabu. His words, sharp as blades, filled the compound. "You have bewitched this boy against me. You have turned the villagers to mock me. May your days be bitter." Zainabu bore his insults in silence, but the wound in her heart grew deeper. For years, she had endured mockery for being barren. She had carried hunger, loneliness, and shame. But betrayal from the man she once loved was a wound that struck to her very soul. Ao, too, was changed. The boy who once laughed freely now carried a quiet fire in his eyes. He worked harder in the fields, trained longer with the hunters, and listened keenly to the elders' stories of courage and justice. But in the silence of night, he would sit by Zainabu's side, holding her hand, whispering, "Mama, do not cry. I promise one day I will lift your head high. The world will know you are more than what they called you." Her tears fell freely then, but they were no longer only of sorrow. They were tears of both pain and hope. The villagers, witnessing Bello's betrayal, began to shift in their judgment. Those who once mocked Zainabu now praised her resilience. Old women came to her hut, offering baskets of yams, saying, "Your love has shamed us all." Truly, a mother is not the one who gives birth, but the one who raises with love. Even children who once mocked Ao now followed him, eager to learn from his strength. Yet envy has many faces. Some in the village, afraid of Ao's growing influence, whispered darkly, "The boy has bewitched even his enemies. Such power is dangerous." And so, though Zainabu's reputation began to heal, the shadow of danger still hung over her and Ao. She had won a battle, but destiny was preparing them for a greater war. One night, as the moon glowed softly, Zainabu sat by the fire, her voice steady as she spoke to Ao. "My son, life has shown me its sharp teeth. It mocked me with barrenness, it scarred me with betrayal. But you are my joy. Whatever storms may come, remember this, the tree that grows deep roots does not fear the wind." Ao nodded, his face lit by the flames. "Mama, your roots are my roots. Your wounds will one day be my strength." And though Zainabu smiled faintly, her heart whispered a prayer. For she knew that the storms of destiny were drawing closer, and soon, her son's promise would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Seasons passed like shadows across the land. The sun rose and fell, rains watered the soil, yet Zainabu's heart remained dry. Each day she sat by the baobab tree where she once sang to Ao as a child, her eyes fixed on the dusty horizon. Hope was the only thing she had left, though even hope felt fragile, like a clay pot balanced on a stone. The village of Kachia, too, carried the memory of the betrayal. Some whispered, "The boy is gone forever." Others, touched by his bravery and kindness, prayed quietly for his return. Bello, meanwhile, spent the cowries recklessly. He bought goats, fine robes, and palm wine, trying to bury his guilt in luxury. But wealth earned through betrayal turned sour. Soon, the goats died mysteriously, the robes wore out, and the wine brought no joy. Instead of honor, villagers mocked him. Children sang behind his back, "The man who sold his son, rich in cowries, poor in soul." His nights were haunted by dreams of fire, chains, and Ao's voice crying, "Mama, Mama." He awoke sweating, his heart pounding, yet his pride bound him in silence. Far away, Ao was growing into manhood in the merchant's household. Life there was harsh, beatings, long hours, and endless labor. But the boy who once ran into fire to save another refused to break. Each stroke of the whip only strengthened his resolve. Each insult deepened his determination. He often remembered Zainabu's words, "The baobab tree does not ask who planted it, it simply grows tall." Those words became his strength. One fateful evening, after years of toil, Ao fled the merchant's compound. Guided only by the stars and the pull of his mother's love, he journeyed through forests and across rivers, facing hunger, wild animals, and exhaustion. Yet his spirit was unshaken. At dawn on the seventh day, weary but unbroken, he arrived at the edge of Kachia. When Zainabu first saw him, she thought her eyes deceived her. He was taller, broader, his face hardened by struggle, yet his eyes still carried the light of the boy she had raised. Dropping her calabash, she ran and embraced him, tears flooding her cheeks. "Ao, my son, the world said you were lost, but the Almighty has brought you home." The villagers gathered, astonished. Some wept openly, others shouted in joy. "The boy lives! The boy returns!" they cried. But among the voices of celebration, there was also the silence of shame. Bello, standing apart, his body trembling as he beheld the son he had betrayed. That evening, under the moonlit sky, the elders called for a gathering at the village square. Ao stood before them, his mother by his side. The chief spoke, "Ao, child of mystery, you were taken from us by greed and betrayal. Now you have returned. Tell us, what do you ask of this village?" Ao's voice, though young, carried the weight of years. "I ask for nothing but the truth. My mother, Zainabu, raised me with love when the world abandoned me. She is my blood, not through birth, but through sacrifice. Let all here know I am her son, and I will never abandon her." The crowd erupted in cheers. Women ululated, men beat their drums, and children danced. Zainabu wept, holding her son's hand tightly. Then Ao turned to Bello, whose eyes were cast downward. Silence fell over the square as all waited. At last, Bello fell to his knees. "Forgive me, my son," he cried, his voice broken. "Greed blinded me. I sold you like a slave, and since that day, my soul has known no rest. I see now that the wealth of the earth is nothing compared to the wealth of a child's heart." The villagers gasped. Never before had Bello bowed so low. But Ao, though hurt, did not let bitterness rule his heart. He remembered his mother's teachings. He stepped forward, lifted Bello from the dust, and said, "Baba, the wound you gave me will heal slowly, but I will not carry hatred. Let your shame be your punishment, and let this village remember, no wealth is worth the price of betrayal." The chief, moved by Ao's words, declared, "From this day, let Ao be known as Aomo Iranluo, the child of destiny. His story shall be told by generations, so that none among us will ever sell blood for cowries." That night, the village rejoiced. Drums echoed into the stars, fires lit the square, and dances swirled until dawn. Zainabu sat quietly, watching her son smile, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She whispered, "Ancestors, you tested me with sorrow, but today you crown me with joy." And so the story of Zainabu and Ao spread beyond Kachia, told in markets, sung in festivals, and carried across the winds of Africa. It was a story of love stronger than blood, of betrayal burned away by forgiveness, and of destiny that no man could sell or silence. Grandma was the heart of her village, a woman whose presence brought peace and comfort to all who crossed her path. Her days